Welcome, warriors, once again to the blood-soaked arena that is the worst fighting game. My eternal quest to dethrone the corrupt, chaotic calamity that is the crappy Criticom. Now, throughout the history of this show, we have clearly seen that Mortal Kombat ripoffs can provide more than enough cannon fodder to throw at our polygonal overlord, and this week's bout will be no different. Who's stepping into the arena? Well, that would be Expect No Mercy.
Expect no mercy!
Yeah, I see a number of you haven't had the pleasure. It was a 1996 Windows-based button basher that is simultaneously unknown, apparently, yet incredibly infamous in fighting game poverty circles. It's got all the hallmarks of the age, a 90s as hell title / box art, and digitized actors that are clearly trying to emulate Midway's moneymaker. But Expect No Mercy has one distinct edge over the likes of Way of the Warrior or Kasumi Ninja. It's based on a movie nobody's seen. Expect No Mercy was also a 1995 straight-to-video martial arts schlockfest that revolved around virtual reality and Billy Blanks, and through various circumstances was made into a video game. Will this cinematic pedigree be enough to cripple Criticom? Well, we won't know for sure until we get it in the ring. Some context should, nay, must be given about how this whole ill-conceived thing came to be. Expect No Mercy, the motion picture, was filmed in beautiful downtown Scarborough, Ontario. And after a week or two, once the shoot was finished, the filmmaker's most likely producer, Jalal Murhi, got into contact with another Ontario institution I've never heard of, Microforum International, who developed nothing I've ever heard of. Oh wait, they made Iron and Blood? Iron Blood. Never mind. Anyway, since there was a name, concept, and characters already in place, it was decided that a video game adaptation would help promote the movie and vice versa. The problem is that Microforum didn't really have a whole lot of experience developing complex video games, but they did specialize in developing the technologies that went into video games: CG backgrounds, animations, music, etc. All of their pre-Expect No Mercy projects had a lot of in-video sequences and live-action FMV footage glued together with some very haphazard gameplay. Nothing with a lot of substance, basically. But hey, when you have a catchy name, super red box art, and it's the 90s, things like gameplay tended not to matter all that much. With the movie already complete, they obviously wanted to get this thing out in a hurry, and thus completely dispensed with a console release, as they wouldn't have to go through certification testing for Nintendo, Sega, or Sony, so Windows it was. Now, I believe it actually started life as a 3.1 exclusive, but a Windows 95 version was added as well. Way to stay on that cutting edge. That aforementioned producer, who also had a role in the film, signed on to be in the game, to give it that true Hollywood feel, but the same cannot be said about the other principal actors. Remember, filming had long since wrapped, so the movie's stars, Billy Blanks, Laurie Holden, oh shit, Sybil, and the Crimson Countess, and I guess Wolf Larson, he was on the Canadian Tarzan show. Fucking awesome. So yeah, none of these actors were available. What'd they do instead? Lookalikes. Or vaguely resembling likes. Now, I'm just going to estimate here, but I'm thinking it took 1 to 3 months to put this fighting game, and I use that term loosely, together, so they could get it into Radio Shacks as fast as they could, in an attempt to fool kids into thinking it was going to be the next Mortal Kombat, which you'd have to be an idiot to believe. Which I did! Yes, I owned a copy of Expect No Mercy in the 90s, as when my parents upgraded our computer, I wanted to get my hands on every PC exclusive fighter I could. So while kids are wasting their time with mid-franchises like Diablo and Quake, I was buying Expect No Mercy, Pray for Death, and Virtua Fighter Remix. And 2 out of 3 ain't bad. As you might have surmised, Microform International's gambit didn't pay off, as their first and only fighting game got lambasted by the few publications willing to review it, which then, decades later, delegated it to being made fun of on mediocre YouTube channels. Now, what happened to Microform? At least one of you may be asking. Well, only after 1 month of Expect No Mercy hitting store shelves, they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Which is something I would be saying to you if this was any sort of logical world. No, Microform lasted up until 2011, surviving on the mobile game boom until nature finally, mercifully, took its course. I'm sure by now you've already seen some footage, so now you at least know what to expect once we start talking about the... When you boot up Expect No Mercy, you are greeted with this, intro. Expect no mercy! Then, when you're still reeling from all of that, you arrive on the main menu. Yeah. Look, I love the 90s, but there's such a thing as two 90s, and this is it. This doesn't feel like it was designed by a game studio, but rather some rank-and-file business bureau that makes CD-based encyclopedias. Oh wait, Microform actually made those. Anyway, go to mission start, and you are then assaulted by this weird hand holding the PS3 boomerang controller, I think?
I just found out. These bastards killed Jordan. She was my partner for 4 years. Listen carefully.
You know, it's great. The model is so much in demand these days. Everybody wants me. You know, whether it's the magazines or the fashion designers, they want me to wear their clothes because they know that whenever I wear their clothes, I make a statement. I start trends. I don't follow them.
Wait a minute. I hear someone. I'll have to contact you later.
And that's our setup. This is the main mode, where you have to fight through 5 opponents in a training section of sorts before you move on to another wave of baddies, furiously click the screen in a bizarre minigame, then disarm a bomb before finally confronting the final boss. Now, who do you play as? Well, that would be the player, this Dorcas wearing an ill-fitting red gi that has no storyline other than he's trying to take down the final boss. You're tasked with having to shut down his Assassin's Guild, which is operating illegally under the guise of being a meta quest academy. So you first pick your opponent, pick your stage, and... Oof. So I'm not sure if they were trying to go for a super fake artificial look because this is supposed to be happening in VR, but if they were, they nailed the shit out of it. It really feels like these characters are just floating on top of some default Windows 95 desktop background, rather than it being its own immersive game world. So yeah, this isn't a great start. Now, technically, the characters look okay when they're just standing there. Well, when you move them around, that's a whole other issue. But regardless, when you take this whole scene in, Expect No Mercy looks like a bit of community college homework in a computer imaging science class, rather than a full-fledged fighting game. Now, since there's only one selectable character, there's kind of only one ending, and in the spirit of saving y'all some time and energy from looking it up yourselves, here's that ending in its entirety.
Mission accomplished. But I have to wonder if Warbeck wasn't only the first of a new breed of criminal bent on world domination. Who knows if today's technology isn't leaving too many of us behind and creating a whole new world for cyber criminals.
You must, along with vision impairment, a serious brain damage because you're not ready for me.
So that's a massive L in the style of Rise of the Robots. There's both no endings and no other selectable fighters in single player, which was, kind of standard by the mid to late 90s. When I think about it, although they all kind of sucked, even Criticom did have individual endings for its entire roster. Like I mentioned, that's all locked to the one-player mode experience, because if you click on the versus mode, there's way more characters, which, as we'll see, is kind of a good and bad thing. There's First of all, this looks like a terrifying, totally legit police lineup of actual criminals. I don't know why does this screen look so weird? There's the player, Dominatrix, Evil Clown, yes, that's his name.
Doink, brah! Making kids cry, brah!
Fango, Khan, and that's all I can remember off the top of my head. As you'll notice, the names of all these goobers don't really appear in-game much, and not at all in the versus mode. They're not on the actual select screen, they don't pop up if you win a round or even the match, and most bafflingly of all, they're not even attached to the life bars. This means you always have to be looking up while doing damage to see who's who, which is such a good idea. I mean, even Street Fighter 1 had that. The Human Killing Machine had that. Damn. Anyway, let's just move on to the audio, maybe. Give it a listen.
The amateur is you.
Okay, stop listening. It's pretty bad. The music is just this cacophony of farty bleeps and bloops that leave no real impression, but it's the yells, grunts, and taunts that are truly next level.
I have seen the amateur and it is you. I have seen the amateur and it is I have seen the amateur. I have seen the amateur. I have seen the amateur.
This might be one of the most annoying sounding fighting games I've ever had the displeasure of hearing. I mean, I thought Double Dragon 5's audio soundscape was grating, but Expect No Mercy makes that sound like Killer fucking Instinct. The taunts are just relentless, and I don't even know why they happen. Are they random, triggered with certain attacks? It's not very clear, and I don't really care to find out why. On the flip side, I'm not gonna lie, I love the inclusion of awful cheesy FMV, but even then, there's not nearly enough of it. I'm not even getting the bad stuff that I like. I'm just struggling to find anything good to say about the presentation here, as even the character designs are so bland and generic, it's hard to really comment on them. Hey, nice default bottom shelf martial arts outfit you got there, loser. That's a really sweet random collection of black material you got. Yeah. The HUD is similarly ugly and forgettable, just basic bars, metal embossed overlays, these pumping hearts that scream graphic design is my passion, stages with absolutely zero animation or scrolling layers, lazy blood splashes that look like strawberry jam. This will be a brief section, because as far as I can figure, Expect No Mercy has no mechanics. There's no throws, no parries, no special moves, nothing about it that justifies its existence. There are fatalities, and I guess they are decently animated, but that's barely a mechanic, so hey, let's just come back around to that no special moves thing. You might think Evil Clown can throw a stinky pie at you, or Dominatrix could use a whip, cause Dominatrix, but no, you simply press a direction and the attack buttons and a bunch of different normals come out with very little rhyme or reason. A few of them sorta look like something approaching special, but it's usually just a longer distance kick or something with an extra spin. Then there's, oh wait, I actually forgot about the game's one mechanic, which is probably its biggest gameplay flaw, this bar, right goddamn here. What does this do? It depletes, constantly. That's because it's stamina based. Every fighting action you do decreases this bar by significant chunks, which means you can never constantly be on the attack. You have to pause every few seconds so it can build back up again, which really makes this whole thing, I don't know, not even a fighting game really. I don't even know what it is. I guess it's supposed to be teaching you to mix up your offense and defense, but when your block button is down, I repeat, down on the controls, you don't even want to bother. And finally, in terms of modes, there's the one player option and versus, and yeah, that's it. Okay, so actually things are really not looking good for Expect No Mercy. Poor presentation, non-existent mechanics, well, except for the one that is there, but it's bad. Fortunately though, its game feel is the worst of all. I mean, you've been looking at it. How do you think this handles? Where some moves have crazy reach with too much animation in startup, while others are lightning fast and are like 2 frames long. Stubby, unresponsive jumps, attacks that go straight through your opponent and never ever hit them? In fact, it's really hard to tell when you are hitting your opponent, as it lacks all hit stun, hit sparks, or anything resembling a satisfying feel of impact when something finally does land. Coupled with how bad it looks, this also doesn't feel like a fighting game. It feels like a bunch of animated GIFs on crack swatting at each other until one of them falls down. This is something that kind of afflicted Way of the Warrior and certainly Human Killing Machine, but at least Warrior had some cool moves, weird mechanics, and that big dumb monster end boss. And Human Killing Machine had, well, it had nothing too. Well, it had the bull, but that came out in 1988. This was 1996. Also, guess what? This absolutely garbo game feel, along with the asinine stamina system, makes this one of the hardest fighting games I've ever played. It took me ages to even beat the first 5 training opponents, and even then, I think I mostly got lucky. I don't know if you can get good at Expect No Mercy, but if you're some basement king who thinks they are, then more power to you. Then there's also the... Wait, give me a second. My brain's fried. A digitized game that's uglier than Kasumi Ninja, has less endings than Criticom, feels worse than Brutal Paws of Fury, has 0 special moves unlike Rise of the Robots, has more annoying sound effects than Double Dragon 5, and way less modes and features than DBZ Taiketsu? Can it be? Cue the transition. I need some time to think about this. Maybe it's because I've been desensitized while throwing all these awful fighters at Criticom, like Rotten Tomatoes being hurled at a bad offensive comedian, but it took me until now to realize we might actually be there. We might be in the realm. At first, I was all like, yeah, this is pretty bad, I guess. But as things started tallying up and falling into place, reality started hitting me, or not hitting me because the collision's so bad. Because I think some core memories from my mind palace have begun unlocking of me hating this game as a kid. I remember now not being able to defeat any of the AI back then either, and how I couldn't figure out any special moves, which is because they never fucking existed. Now, all of these damning elements have been present in other games we've covered, but not this many have been present in one singular game. Usually there's a few cool characters or some other aspect of the presentation which can offset an otherwise bad game from becoming the bad game, but I don't think Expect No Mercy has any of that. I mean, look at Ultra Vortec, for example. It's awful, but at the same time, look at the select screen and how goddamn awesome it is. Same thing with Street Fighter the movie. It's kind of stupid and unbalanced, but Kylie Minogue is in it. And on top of all of that, Expect No Mercy isn't some no-name Steam indie fighter that shadow dropped out of nowhere and made by one guy who flipped assets. This was a full-price box release based on a movie that was sold in stores. Probably not in many stores, but my point remains. But the most heinous thing of all that I briefly mentioned earlier was the time of release. If this was the first digitized fighter ever made and came out in the late 80s, I could excuse a lot of this, but this was 1996. The same year as Ultimate MK3, KI Gold, Street Fighter Alpha 2, and Virtua Fighter 3. The fighting game was not this new, unproven genre with loose rules and design elements. It had been around for half a decade by that point, so the fact someone would do this bad of a job and ignore so many of those established design elements is just monumental in its morality. Criticom at least had the excuse of being a rushed release on brand new hardware, and as bad as it is, at least it had a few mechanics, content, and endings for its characters. So, bring it up, the tier list, let's see it. So, yeah, I bet none of you were expecting this, but I think Expect No Mercy has done the impossible, seen the invisible, Row, become the new worst fighting game. Its total lack of compelling gameplay, characters, features, graphics, music, and just everything truly earns it this accolade. And unlike Chronos Interactive, who made Criticom, Microforum apparently never improved in their game making. Chronos went on to develop Dark Rift and Cardinal Sin, which, while not amazing, were certainly better, and then branched out to their much more successful Fear Effects series. Microforum? I guess Iron Blood? I don't know. Anyway, so what does this mean for us, Warriors? Well, with Criticom now sobbing on the floor, lamenting its lost title, that means I'll just have to continue this quest. There's tons of games you have all requested over the last year and a half that I have yet to experience. Dangerous Streets, Pit Fighter, Cat Fight, Bikini Karate Babes, and of course, Shadow War of Succession. All of these hungry wolves are now craving for your crown, Expect No Mercy, so you better be ready to defend it. Because, as of the making of this video, you are now the worst fighting game. A big thanks goes out to Morales down at my Patreon for throwing Expect No Mercy in my crosshairs. And if you out there know of any other potential contenders I have not yet mentioned, do let me know in the comments below or sound the battle gong in the temple that is my Twitter. Until then, Warriors, I'll see you next time on the worst fighting game.